Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening to Meaningless, where we look into memes to find out whether or not they are, in fact, meaningless. Today is an extra exciting episode because we have another special guest, but this time we have the host of one of my new favorite podcasts, I should say, Dr. Kaveh Hoda. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Introduce
That's
yourself.
my line, you bastard. Trademark.
Trademark copyright.
25 cents for that.
All right, I'll send
Thank you for having me on your show. Thank you very much. This is very nice. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to learn what a meme is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I assumed that you've never heard of a meme. That's what that was my assumption when I invited you
Listen,
on.
it's not covered in medical school. I didn't learn about it. I am an older man. I don't know things. I don't know what's happening right now. I'm talking to a computer and I don't know
And
if anyone can hear it.
somehow a voice is coming back. Like, am I imagining this? Is this real? Uh,
I'm lost. Help me.
so
Help me.
now, speaking of being an old man, I am going to attempt to use Zoom here. I usually use Discord, but let's see. I am actually going to. So one of the things I like to do. Actually, I'm going to do to you one of the things you like to do to other people before I do the thing I like to do.
Don't put a finger in my butt. I do that for work. I don't do that for pleasure with my patients. That is for work.
That's work.
People's health.
Okay, all right. Well, if I did ask you to do that, I would pay you.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
that's fair.
but I do have a sponsor ad read for you to read.
Okay, fantastic. I'm so glad I could. This episode of Meaningless is brought to you by that thing my sister posted about. I can't quite remember what it is, how it works, or what it's called, but if you could prescribe that, the internet said it's good for the ailment I can only vaguely describe. That thing my sister posted about. Definitely not a grift. Sorry, man, I ruined your perfectly good
Um,
ad copy.
oh, it was beautiful. It was absolutely
That's
beautiful.
good ad copy. I hope they're paying you well for that.
Yeah, yeah, no, that thing her sister posted about is they shell out pretty much nonsense. They actually didn't pay me anything, but
Well,
I
you gotta. That's how the grift works, I guess.
yeah.
It's a pyramid scheme.
You know,
You got
like
me to do it.
it's like as they say, there's a grift for everyone. We're all gonna
That's
fall
right.
for something.
That's exact. I say that all the time. There
Yeah,
is
it's
a addiction for everyone. There is a grift for everyone. Something will get everyone,
yeah,
no doubt.
that is absolutely true. And then when it comes to addictions, I have been playing so many video games lately that I'm not productive. Once I'm off work, I've been addicted to them, and it's been like a week, and I've been wasting so much time. But I've also been tired because work's been busy.
Yeah,
Hospitals
treat
get
yourself.
busy. I mean, you know how
I've
it
heard
is.
of that. Yeah, I've heard that that can happen. Yeah. Yeah, treat yourself. I honestly believe that like I in video games, if they're overdone, if someone only plays first person shooters, if they do it to an extreme, it's unhealthy. Sure, I believe that. But I think it's as valid a form of relaxation as almost any other one that is more like, you know, more positively looked upon like meditation or yoga. Like I think
Yeah.
it is a pretty valid form of relaxation for a lot of people. So I'm all for it. I'm glad you're playing it. What are you playing?
Right now I've been playing a game called Control. It's
Like, wait, hold on. Are you like into like Steam and like hardcore gaming shit? Because if so, I will not be able to follow you. It has to be like Atari or PlayStation for me to
I
know what you're
have
talking about.
both of those as well. I actually have right now hooked up to my TV 20 game consoles, and I'm not kidding. So like,
That's
and that's going all the way back to like the 80s. So
okay. Well, maybe we do have a problem. We need, maybe we do. Maybe
it's
we do got to get back to that later.
it's more of a collector hobby. Now, I tormented you with the ad read already,
Okay.
which I know that's your thing. But what we like to do on this show is the meme that we're covering. I usually like to send it to our guest and see if they can describe what is happening in the meme.
Okay.
And it's okay if like you don't know for sure what it is. I mean, you probably do, but we'll see.
Don't give me too much credit. Let's do it. Let me see it.
Here it is.
Okay. It looks like there's a man working at what looks like a cooking table or like No, like it's something with like an ex like experimental lab.
Mhm.
There's a bottle in front, like an empty Coke bottle. There is a wok-looking object. He has like a ladle in it, and he's with his other hand holding a bowl over it. Looks like very metallic, a lot of metallic stuff happening here.
Mhm. And then how does it
I'm
read?
not,
What does it read at the
and it
top?
reads, okay, if it flashes blue, it's a boy, and if it flashes pink, it's a girl. So this is some sort of play and joke on the gender reveal stuff that we see all the time now. But it
Yeah.
has something to do with science, and I'm guessing this is like some Tesla level like science guy I should probably know, but I don't.
This
Tell me what's going on.
so
What is it?
it is so fantastic that you didn't immediately recognize it because I was kind of afraid that this was in like a popular documentary I missed or something and everybody already knows what it is. But no, I had no idea what this was when I first saw it. So I kind of dug into it. I did like some image searches and some research, and I am going to dig into this here. Dr. Hoda, Kaveh with
Hmm.
cream, Hoda man,
Don't take
however,
any of those. Yeah.
however you want to be addressed.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
am going to cover this meme and what the image is. Now, we're going to focus mostly on the image. We're not going to focus so much on the gender reveal thing because I know that there's going to be a meme in the future where I can dig into that. But this was unique when I read about this. And I kind of want to step back in time a little bit. Now, typically, I like to cover things that are contemporary because usually that's what's trending. But there were a ton of memes involving this specific thing, and we have to kind of go back in history to understand the origins of it. So I want to talk
Wait,
briefly.
can I ask a quick question before you do that?
Yeah,
Where did you see this meme? Because I feel like I see most memes on Twitter, but I have not seen this one. Where did you see this?
I do a lot of lurking on Reddit. I mean, I don't ever get on there to post, but I do a lot of lurking. And
Okay.
there's one that I have found is really good for memes that people aren't quite understanding. And it's called
Mm,
Peter. It's called Peter Explain the Joke. So like
mm-hmm.
it's basically these vague memes that people don't understand the background of, and so it's kind of a good source to get to because a lot of this stuff ends up getting shared on like kind of sometimes Twitter or Facebook or Reddit or whatever without
Okay.
anybody giving the actual context, and
Okay.
so I kind of like to dig into some of those things. The ones I like to cover the most are the ones that are spreading misinformation.
Uh-huh.
But this one, it turned out more interesting than misinforming. There was one little tidbit in the comments that a lot of people were posting that is not technically true about this situation. So, and I will go over that. So,
All right. I like it.
yeah,
Battling misinformation. I'm
and
on board. You
yeah,
got me.
it's my favorite thing to do. It's the whole reason I started this podcast.
Yeah,
um,
I hear you.
in order to like give this meme context, like I want to step back in time a little bit back in history to talk about the first woman who won the Nobel Prize, Marie Curie. There are a few things most people know about her, like the fact that she was a chemist, physicist, and a pioneer of discovering and researching radioactivity, and famously she likely died of long-term radiation poisoning.
Mhm.
This had a lot to do with the fact that the dangers of radiation and radioactivity were not yet known at the time, so there weren't a lot of safety precautions taken in regard to handling potentially radioactive materials. I'm going to read a quote from her when she was talking about her working conditions. The School of Physics could give us no suitable premises. For lack of anything better, the director permitted us to use an abandoned shed, which had been in service as a dissecting room of the School of Medicine. Its glass roof did not afford complete shelter against the rain. The heat was suffocating in the summer, and the bitter cold of winter was only a little lessened by the iron stove, except in its immediate vicinity. There was no question of obtaining the needed proper apparatus in common use by chemists. We simply had some old pine wood tables with furnaces and gas burners. We had to use the adjoining yard for those of our chemical operations that involved producing irritating gases. Even then, the gas often filled our shed. With this equipment, we entered our exhausting work. Not ideal for handling dangerous chemicals, like
No,
especially
this does not seem like a
it
laboratory that was well designed to deal with radioactivity. I
it
mean,
does.
It looks like a workbench in a garage.
Yeah, oh, that's essentially what she describes, and it with a leaky roof, even, like, and
Yeah.
does not bode well, for handling radioactive material. Obviously, her quote continues with a part that had been brought up by at least one of my physics teachers and one of my chemist teachers, and it says, "One of our joys was to go into our workroom at night. We then perceived on all sides a feebly luminous silhouette of all the bottles or capsules containing our products. It was really lovely sight and always new to us. The glowing tubes looked like faint fairy lights."
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure it looked beautiful. That radium chloride soaking into her bones.
yep. Delicious. I'm sure her bone marrow thanked her later on. So,
Don't
so
check that.
after attributed, like often attributed to her attraction to this glow, many had cited her frequent handling of radium as the cause of the aplastic anemia that took her life. But since she wasn't likely ingesting it, some had speculated that it was more likely caused during her field work in World War One, when she was practicing radiology without any sort of protection.
Hmm.
That being said, though, supposedly 100 years after, like 100 years later after she passed, many of her possessions, including her original paperwork, were considered too dangerous to be handled because they were
Hmm.
still radioactive.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and her paperwork is kept in lead-lined boxes, and protective clothing is required before handling it.
Yeah, I've heard that. That is interesting because she did work with a guy that, getting back to what you said, she did work with a guy who invented the X-ray, I think, correct? I mean, that was like how she started off before I mean, I don't know enough of her history as much as
Yeah,
I should, considering how important she is. But so she was working with the guy, Roentgen, I think his name was
yeah,
Wilhelm Roentgen. Like they named like X-rays after him.
yeah, and like she used that experience to like basically do volunteer work during World War One.
Uh,
Like so, she was out there on the field doing actual work with, because of her experience with that kind of thing. And I had read somewhere that she was using irradiated material to like seal up wounds that would otherwise have
yeah.
been, led to amputation, things like that. I don't know how accurate all that is because I can only find like one or two sources that said it. And when they
Mm.
reference each other, I get a little suspicious.
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, I didn't know about, and I honestly can't imagine that being of any use whatsoever. But
Yeah, yeah,
I know that she worked with X-rays, so yeah, I guess it makes sense. She would have a lot of, I guess, possible cancer-causing agents in her life,
yeah.
and something that would wipe out her bone marrow as well, I guess. But I guess, what are you going to tell me? You're going to tell me how this picture ties into this because I'm still fascinated by this metal
Yeah,
contraption that looks
yeah.
like a walk.
Yeah, so we're going to get to that. So Mary Curie died in 1934 at the age of 66. But and like it, obviously you can't prove exactly what caused Mary Curie to die, like so many years later. But I will say that basically a decade after her death, safety precautions didn't completely improve. Like we still hadn't quite nailed it. So like in the 30s, after so she died in 1934, and in the 30s there continued to be tremendous breakthroughs in understanding radioactivity, along with other generalized physics and chemistry. And like with any scientific progress, of course, the people who have the best intentions in mind are the world governments.
Right.
So they always have the best intentions. And
Yeah.
and that's why we come to a program codenamed Tube Alloys. It's a collaboration between Great Britain and Canada, and it would be the first nuclear weapons project, which would later
Mm.
be subsumed into the Manhattan Project, that is a little better
Mm.
known, and that's a collaboration between Canada and the United States. Which I have to say, who would have thought Canada would have it in them?
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad that we're not letting them off the hook. I'm so tired of them thinking they're better than us because
Yeah,
but they're essentially just a, they're a slight variation of the same nonsense. There's
it's
just
it's so
slight
true.
twist. on the flavor.
Yeah, it's their calm voice and their politeness that just tricks us into thinking they're all decent. But really,
No,
they were involved. We
no.
were only involved in one nuclear weapons project, and they were involved in two. So,
Animals.
if anything, they're twice as bad as us.
Yeah. Maple loving monsters. I
Uh,
love you, Canada. I'm sorry.
I,
I
I
know.
I do
I'm
too.
sorry.
I do too. I actually wanted to go to the University of Toronto before I changed paths. So, uh,
No, it's yeah, Canada's pretty great. I mean,
yeah,
you should go to Montreal is where you got to
I've
go. You
I've
got to
never
go
been.
to oh yeah, you got to go. It's great. Great bagels.
No, and we're going to talk about some Canadians actually. So,
I thought you were gonna say we're talking about some bagels, and I was really excited.
oh
I
no,
was
we
like,
could talk about that
yes,
too. We could talk about that
let's
too.
talk about bagels.
I do like me some bagels. I like the everything bagel. That's my favorite.
Oh, it's disgusting.
You did what? How?
No,
You know they.
no.
You
I
know
mean,
they.
come on, focus on something. You
Uh,
can't have
uh,
everything on a bagel. It's ridiculous. Give me
uh,
two flavors at
de-
most.
define everything.
I
you
know that's
you know
too
they
much stuff.
they banned everything bagels in South Korea recently.
No, and I don't know why. Why is that?
There's something in the seasoning they don't like. I mean, if it's got everything, there's gonna be something illegal in it, right?
Oh,
Um,
so they banned it. Like they just didn't like it. They're like, this can't come. We can't have this anymore. Like
yeah,
they made it
no,
like,
yeah, they legally banned everything seasoning in South Korea, and I haven't looked enough into it why to really like discuss it. I'm just
because
like
they have good taste. That's why. Because they have good taste. That's the only reason.
because they know better is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the U.S. though, okay, well, getting back to our situation here, our meme that
Yeah.
doesn't technically have anything to do with bagels unless everything includes whatever that metal thing is in the picture. Now, the US would not fully share the results of their research on nuclear weapons with Great Britain, but don't worry. The Soviet Union would use spies to gain information about atomic research, and today we have 8 sovereign states with nuclear weapons.
Everything worked out.
Yep, everything worked out fine. The United States was first, though, so we're still number one. And another thing we can also be proud of is that the U.S. is still the only country to have ever used nuclear weapons in armed conflict. Haha, we're number one. We're number one.
Yay.
Okay, maybe that's not something to be proud of, but
Yeah.
But yeah, so on August 6th and August 9th, the United States dropped the bomb named Little Boy on Hiroshima and Fat Man on Nagasaki. Most people are aware of these events and these two bombs, but, and this was something I was previously unaware of, and this is probably because I'm not like the biggest history buff, and I probably should be to give myself more context of the things I talk about, but there was a third nuclear weapon being prepared to be dropped on Japan. It was ultimately unused, not because we grew a conscience as a country, but because Japan surrendered.
God.
Yeah,
How many bombs were we going to drop on those poor people?
I don't
For the
know.
love of God.
All
I
I,
don't know about I don't know enough about this either. Because I'm getting to that age now where I have developed an interest in smoking meats and World War II history.
yeah,
I have gotten to that point, but only recently, so I still don't know that much about it. So that is a surprise. I'm not surprised, I guess I should say. It's not
yeah.
surprising that we had an extra one up our sleeves that we were working on.
I'm mostly surprised that I hadn't heard about it before.
Yeah.
Even as somebody who doesn't like, I didn't read a whole lot about World War II. But like, I'm shocked that this wasn't like something that was more common now, like enough common knowledge for me to have just come across it at some point.
Yeah. No.
But so what we're looking at in the image, this is a replica of the plutonium core that had been prepared for the third bomb. Um,
Ah.
yeah. So one of the pieces of misinformation that was going around was that this was a photograph taken during like during the time that they were actually working on the core, but no, this is a replica. This is like a reenactment of the event. You don't Well, we never used this third bomb, but you don't have to feel bad for the unused core. It actually made history in other ways. On August 21st, 1945, at the Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico, a very young physicist, 24-year-old Harotun Krieger Daglian, I'm probably butchering that name, he was working with this core. He was manually building a neutron reflector around the core with tungsten bricks. So a neutron reflector essentially reduces the mass that would be required in order to reach criticality by reflecting neutrons back into the core. So, as Daglian was about to add the final tungsten brick, the neutron counters monitoring the activity signaled that this additional brick would cause supercriticality, which is definitely not what he wanted. So,
Yeah, it sounds really bad.
yeah, it sounds like a scary thing that's going to happen. So, with the brick still in hand, he attempts to move his hand away from the core, but drops the brick into the assembly and onto the core. He attempts to bat the brick away, but to no avail, and the core became what's called prompt critical. So this is having a nuclear fission chain reaction that's happening, and that means he's being exposed to dangerous amounts of radiation.
I'm
So,
assuming he's not wearing anything protective either. Maybe
oh, no.
gloves at most.
Oh, of course not. this
Yeah.
this is in the 40s. Like, we're talking. There's no such thing as safety back then. Like
Yeah.
like you know how people look back at they post like a picture of kids riding bikes without helmets. It's like, well, today they'd have knee pads and a bubble suit and all this. I feel like the same type of people would look at those big radiation suits and be like, yeah, we did it all by hand back in the 40s.
Pussies. They're consolation prizes. We handled bricks of radiation.
We used to lick them to stick them together.
Use it as a paperweight.
To stop this chain reaction, Daglian, he removes some of the other tungsten bricks, but not before having a lethal dose of radiation. Medical treatment actually gets started immediately on him, but he ends up with severe radiation poisoning and dies in a coma 25 days after the event.
Fucking terrible.
Yeah, it's awful. That's a horrible way to go. And Daglian was the first person to die from a critical accident, which is radiation exposure due to an unintended criticality. So this earned the core the nickname Demon Core. Now, originally it
like
was
a Swedish music genre.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah, it does. It does sound like one of those, even like an Eastern European metal, like
yeah.
like yeah. I mostly listen to Demon Core.
I'm into the Demon Core.
I'd actually I'd be
Yeah.
surprised if there's not something already called that.
Yeah. We'll check it later.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're gonna look up Demon Core for sure. So the United States is not about to let a perfectly good core go to waste. Just because it's a little demonic doesn't mean we need to throw it away, right?
Yeah.
Plus, what are the
Waste
chances?
that stuff?
Yeah, seriously. And what are the chances that this is going to happen again, right?
I'm assuming 3 more times.
Well, this is one thing. We both work in hospitals.
Correct.
And so I think the best practice is to err opposite the side of caution. I'm pretty certain that's how hospitals work. I haven't asked the one I work for, but I'm guessing that's generally accepted best practice. Plus, it's probably called Demon Core for good luck, right? I mean,
Yeah. Right. It's like sometimes things are sort of like you say something's really nasty, but it means it's good.
Yeah.
It's like the ironic
Yeah,
sort of thing
or
that's happening here.
Yeah, or when you're getting on stage, they tell you to break a leg.
Yeah.
That's got to be it. Like,
Demon Core is like, this is super cool.
yeah. Otherwise, they'd call it the Fairy Core, and then we'd know to avoid it. Like, I mean, that's probably
not in the 40s.
That's true. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. No.
Man Core is what they would call this.
the masculine core.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. Okay. Picture this. You are at Los Alamos Laboratory working with atomic weapons research, and an eccentric man walks in, dressed unlike any of the other scientists. He's wearing blue jeans and a cowboy hat and standing at a towering 5'8". I'm going to send you...
cool.
Yeah.
Not like the other scientists.
That's
cool.
right. He's the cool scientist. I'm going to send you a picture of this guy, and I kind of want to know your first impression when you just see what he looks like. Like, what do you think of the photo?
Photo is of a nerdy looking accountant.
Hmm?
And he looks like he's been arrested and he's like getting his mugshot.
That was my first impression too. As soon as I saw this picture, I'm like, oh, what the fuck did this guy do? Um, but no, this is actually the way they took their IDs at the Los Alamos laboratory. So this is his ID photo.
Yeah. So he's a
Which,
bad boy, this guy. This
yeah,
bespectacled scientist.
bad boy cowboy. This is Lewis Slaughton. He essentially he's a Jewish cowboy physicist, and he was born to Yiddish speaking parents in Canada. See, I told you Canada was coming back. And so his parents had fled there to escape the pogroms happening in Russia at the time.
Mhm.
So with this background, Lewis's family recognized and practiced certain traditions, which will actually be important later on. Throughout school, Lewis excelled. With his brother Sam even said that he had this uncanny ability to just study for long periods of time, like hours. He could just study and study and study. He had a huge impact actually on the understanding and development of nuclear technology. And in fact, if you've ever heard the terms dollars or cents referring to the interval between delayed and prompt reactivity, Lewis is the one who coined that term.
Wow.
Yeah.
So stylish and iconic.
That's right. I wish he had the cowboy hat on in the picture, though. That
So
would have
that's
been
something
even.
he actually did. He wore a cowboy hat.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. He was
That's pretty
reported to
rad.
have. Yeah. Yeah. Just walking into a laboratory with the cowboy hat on. Now, like when I see somebody walking around Walmart with a cowboy hat on, I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. But man, if you're a physicist and you walk into a nuclear laboratory and you're just wearing a cowboy hat, like, that's Buckaroo Banzai right there. Like, that's a
Yeah.
badass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, okay, so you didn't laugh at my coined joke, even though that was comedy gold.
It was fantastic. That's my bad.
Thanks. Have you ever wanted to coin a term in your field?
No, I mean, I never quite understood that. Like discovering a disease and naming it after yourself always seems strange to me. Like I don't know why I'd want my name associated with a gangrene of like the perineum. So yeah,
Perineum gangrene, named after
yeah, don't
named
don't look
after
up for
Kaveh Hoda.
don't look up Fournier's gangrene.
No,
Or
don't.
do
Yeah,
do it. Do
my
it. Yeah, learn something today.
that's yeah, true. Like it,
Yeah, no, but that never appealed to me.
yeah. I mean, you don't have to name it after yourself. So he called those dollars and cents. And he didn't name it after himself. Like maybe like a medical instrument that like
Mm, yeah.
the Kaveh dilator. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, still no.
No,
I mean,
okay.
and also like when I started to train, we were starting to try and move away from like diseases named after people because like the more we learned about those people, the more we realized they probably were terrible people.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, we'd be like, this is a really important contribution to science, but the person that named this disease was also probably a Nazi. So we don't
Yes.
have to
Yeah.
use the person's name. So we were kind of moving away from it. So yeah, no, I'd rather have a sandwich in a local sub shop named after me. That's what I would like.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That would make me happy.
The Kaveh MD
Yeah.
BLT.
Or just the cave. Just the
The
cave.
Kaveh.
Like that. And it would have turkey. It would have
I imagine it
let me
having
think
have
about I gotta
like a
think about this.
vinaigrette on it. Like
No, I don't want turkey. I want shredded chicken is what I want. I want shredded lettuce. I want like New Mexico roasted chilies on it.
oh, that sounds
And so I want to have a little bit of heat. It's got to have a little bit of spice to it.
good. Yeah.
And like a spicy aioli on like a toasted thin sourdough bread. But it has to be thin and it has to be sourdough. That's where I'd start with it. I'll think more about the details of this later, but that's
Yeah.
that's where I want my sandwich to
Yeah,
start.
you're onto something. You're onto something here,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. And one of my favorite things about talking to you is how we always stay on subject.
Yeah.
No, that's honestly. I'm
Have you
all,
noticed? I'm trying to get you on talking about bagels and like
you're hungry, aren't you?
sandwiches and food, and you want to talk about science.
Yeah, I know.
Science? Science? We're talking about science, the thing that I love. the thing that I practice, the thing that I die for. We're talking about science. We're talking about science.
Yeah, we're gonna like. I mean, we're just hanging out talking about science. I mean, or food. If
Sorry,
you
that
want to
was a,
talk about food, it's fine.
it was an Allen Iverson reference. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go on, please. Go on. Tell me more about this cowboy nerd.
Well, this might be shocking to you, but Lewis worked with the Demon Core. Actually, I guess that's not that shocking. I wouldn't have brought him up otherwise. But much like Doglian, part of Lewis's work was with neutron reflectors. But rather than building a shield around it, physically by hand with tungsten bricks, the core had a dome-shaped beryllium shield, and the bottom half of the sphere was already it's a sphere-shaped shield, but like the bottom half is already attached to the plutonium core, and the top one has like a thumb hole in the top that way it can be lowered down carefully in order to kind of test the reactivity of it and see like what activity you can increase as you lower the shield down. And this shield, so like there are these brackets that keep the shield open enough that enough energy is coming out that it's not going to reach that chain reaction and reach supercriticality. Now, if these shields close together, that's a dangerous situation. So Lewis, in addition to being a dedicated scientist, was, as far as I could tell, a little bit of a free spirit. And some of the colleagues would joke that he would often do something called tickling the dragon's tail. Have you ever heard this term?
I'm assuming that's code for masturbating.
It sounds like it, but it's actually not. So this term comes from the very famous Richard Feynman. He would often refer to a certain practice as tickling the tail of a sleeping dragon. So when the dome shield is in place, the activity of the core increases by the aforementioned process of reflecting energy back into the core, and thus causing the mass to increase in radioactivity more quickly. But you have those brackets that keep it from completely closing. Now, Dr. Hoda, I want to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you've looked in a lot of butts, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you've ever been unable to find the dilator, would you improvise and use something else to prop the anus open?
So we don't dilate the anus. Let me say that right now. I don't want people going for an exam thinking that there's routine dilation of the
caliper.
Anus. Usually that is not what's occurring. But I will never improvise instruments on a patient.
Okay. All right. That's probably good practice. Lewis, on the other hand, he wasn't afraid to improvise. Rather than bothering with those pesky brackets, he would use a flathead screwdriver turned to the wider part and just kind of keep the shields propped open. That way they weren't touching. Now, the reason why Richard Feynman called bringing these shields so precariously close together tickling the tail of a sleeping dragon is because with this demonstration, you come very close to a point where you can start a chain reaction and supercriticality, which we've already seen is deadly. And I can imagine, like as this scientist is doing this very scary practice with the screwdriver, and his coworkers going, "Oh, well, there goes Louis again, tickling the old dragon's tail." So, like, they would joke about it. They would just say he's tickling the dragon's tail. I kind of want to hear like one of them yell from the other room, like, "Hey, Louis, how about you and that dragon get a room?" But
yeah. I mean, it sounds dirty. It sounds dirty.
It does. It really does. I mean, anything with the word tickling in it, it's really hard to find the word tickling not,
it's hard to make it work in a respectful manner.
Yeah. Like even the phrase "tickles my fancy" just sounds like what's your fancy? It sounds like a physical part of you. It's just gross. Mm-hmm. But on May 21st, 1946, a date that I'm addressing very specifically, so this was just an average day like any other. Mm-hmm. Lewis was instructing a colleague who was slotted to replace him. This colleague's name was Alvin C. Graves. And to the listeners, I don't want anybody here speculating on whether or not his last name foreshadows anything, because dark and inappropriate humor is not something we allow in this show. We don't condone it, and we definitely don't constantly do it. Anyway, on this day, a grave mistake was made.
I see what you did there.
Lewis was showing Graves or Gravy, as he liked to be called. He was showing him the ropes, and along with 6 other colleagues at the time. And they came to the room containing the demon core. Now, I don't know for certain if Lewis divulged to them the nickname of the core, or if all of his colleagues, or if his colleagues and the people he was teaching already knew about its history, or that that it has killed before and probably wants to again. Do you think a radioactive core could have bloodlust?
Like it's killed before and now it's gotten the taste of male and it
Yeah,
wants more. Yeah.
it wants to consume. Like, I don't know enough about nuclear weapons to know for sure, but I think their efficacy calls for further research into their nefarious nature. That's what I think.
Yeah.
So,
It checks out.
so of course, Graves, like anybody else in his position, was more than willing to see Lewis perform a demonstration of the core's activity because Lewis he's a highly respected scientist and probably one of the best people at the time you could have demonstrate this kind of thing. So it's a huge learning opportunity. So, with no need to bother with the brackets, Lewis lowers the upper shield over the demon core, and he's using his left hand to lower the upper shield over the demon core. And he has his thumb in the hole at the time. He's got his thumb in the thumb hole. And Dr. Hoda, I want you to lend a bit of your expertise on this matter. Do you think thumb hole is a good alternative name for an anus?
No, because it implies that it has to be the thumb where there's so many things that can go there.
Just not frozen hot dogs.
Not frozen hot dogs, things preferably with a flare.
Probably
Please
not.
don't lose. I'm going to take this opportunity. Since you brought it up, I'm going to take this opportunity to educate your listeners. Please don't put anything into your anus that does not have a flared base, that is not well attached, that is not secure, because you will underestimate the vacuum power of your anus and it will get drawn upward into your colon, at which point it can be a life-threatening problem for which I will be called in the middle of the night to remove, and I will not be happy about that. Please don't do that, especially because I may not be there to get it out of you. Okay?
Yeah, he can't be everywhere at once. And a lot like Spider-Man, everyone only gets one. So
Yeah.
no, that's actually good advice because I have heard about people getting something that has gone up and they can't get it back out.
That's correct.
Ugh, it's frightening. So with his left thumb squarely in the shield's anus, Lewis lowers the top shield over the core. The readers begin indicating increased activity, and in Lewis's right hand, he's got the flathead screwdriver, which he's using to keep the shield spaced apart. Suddenly, the screwdriver slips, and the shield essentially closes. Now, before I move on, I do want to mention and address the fact that in some reports he gets a lot of flack for this practice with this practice with the screwdriver and everything. But there are more experienced people who are suggesting that this was actually fairly common practice. I'm not sure which is completely true, but either way, common or not, some regulation was probably appropriate to advise against doing this. Like I like, especially if it is common, because that means more people are taking the risk,
Yeah.
But this is a huge deadly risk that we're talking about. But that being said, some argue that Lewis wasn't just being reckless, like some people say, in regard to what was typical practice. And we do have to consider that previously only one person had ever died of a critical accident. So maybe this was something they did all the time, and it's only killed one person, like that might have been the mentality of it all. But according to reports by those in the room, they say that there was a bright blue light that came out of the core. And there was a feeling of heat, even by the people who were standing furthest from it. And there were 6 of them in this fairly large room, and some were pretty far away from it, and even they reported feeling the heat. The blue light presumably was the ionization of the air in the room, so the core had reached supercriticality. Lewis knocks the top shield off of the core and slumps his body over it. There were conflicting ways of that people have written about this. Some say that he did it to, save everyone else. Others say that he just collapsed,
He did the World War II jump on the live grenade thing to protect his
He did the
his band of brothers.
he did the master class of doing that.
Yeah,
He
wow.
jumped on a nuclear bomb to save others.
Yeah.
He had already received a lethal dose of radiation at that point, and supposedly he had said that he was already aware that he definitely received a lethal dose of radiation. His body blocking the core actually likely did save some of the lives in that room. Now, as for what happened next, I'm actually going to read a quote from a biologist named Thomas D. Block, who did a lot of work studying accidents at the Los Alamos laboratory. Quote, in addition to the blue glow and heat, Lewis Slotin experienced a sour taste in his mouth, an intense burning sensation in his left hand. As soon as Slotin left the building, he vomited, a common reaction to intense radiation. Lewis would die 9 days later.
Wow.
Yeah. But this next part, I find this next part kind of incredible. So, as I said before, Lewis's family followed certain traditions, and this would generally affect how deceased family members were handled. And I'm going to quote from a letter written by one Philip Morris. So, quote, on the morning after Lewis died, Hedgerman and I explained to Mr. Slotin, referring to Lewis's father, about the need for an autopsy. He told us that it was against the traditions of the family and that he would be criticized for it when he returned to Winnipeg. But he gave permission for it now. He said that Lewis had been a scientist all his life and that when it could do him no harm, it would be wrong to prevent him from adding to knowledge. I think that's incredible.
So what happened? Did the family agree to it?
They only had to ask the father because the rest of the family was back in Canada, and the father came down to the lab in Los Alamos to basically talk to the scientists who were there when Lewis passed, and he gave permission for them to do the autopsy because of his son's dedication to science.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I think that's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of incredible. Like,
I mean, I think it's definitely what he would want.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the way it sounds like from this quote from his father. So, like, I think it does, and it says a lot about Lewis's dedication to science, for his father to forego family tradition in support of his son's legacy. And like, as a secular person myself, I have nothing against having an autopsy done. But one thing I do find interesting is that our dental history is unique enough to each of us that odontology can generally identify bodies through dental records. But what do you do when, say, the teeth are too obliterated or even missing, or say the head's missing, like, a killer took it, and, the arms might be gone too, so no fingerprints. So this is where your expertise might come once again handy. Have you ever considered inking buttholes and taking butthole prints?
Like forensic proctology.
Yeah,
I've given
like
a lot of consideration.
Yeah, like, I mean, what if like we had on file, like every
Every butthole is unique. No, it's true.
Yeah.
I've been pitching this idea of CSI forensic proctology for a while now. NBC hasn't been that interested, but I'm going to keep at it because I think there's something to it. Solving crimes through the dead anus, I think, is the way to go. I think it's going to be
they just
the next thing. Just bring together, Grey's Anatomy, a little bit of CSI, and a lot of fecophilia. And I think together you got magic.
I think so too. Yeah, and I think keep pitching it because I think they just don't realize that the world is ready for this now.
That's right.
We're ready for it. It's time.
That's right.
It's time for this show.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of now I'm thinking about that scene in Men in Black when they burn off Will Smith's fingertips, like his fingerprints.
Oh, I don't remember that. But
there's a quick little part where he's like getting inducted into the Men in Black, and he grabs it. He has to hold this little sphere thing, and it burns his fingerprints off. So he's untraceable. That scene is about to become a lot more unpleasant.
Yeah.
Like I picture him squatting onto some kind of rod with something to burn his butthole wrinkles off.
Stop picturing that. Stop picturing that. You don't have to picture that. You're choosing to picture that.
You're right. I'm gonna have nightmares if I keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about the Demon Core?
So that's coming back to this. So it's not about so you had me in the beginning thinking this is going to be somehow related to directly to Mary Curie,
Yeah,
and she
yes.
was just the beginning of this story that culminated in this picture, which is a reenactment
Hmm.
of the tickling the dragon. Um, and with this, okay, if it flashes blue, it's a boy, and if it flashes pink, it's a girl,
It
which
flashed blue,
now
by the way.
makes
Yeah.
sense. My question is this: who the fuck is this meme for? Like, there's three people maybe in the world that will understand this fucking meme. What the fuck is
So
this? Is not a meme. This is a picture between two science nerds who are deeply into this, maybe writing a paper about this. Who else would fucking get this? I
yeah,
don't understand.
that's one thing I've like researching memes. That's something I've run into. At least a few times where these memes. It's almost like if you get it, you're in the club, and so they're intentionally vague, uh, to make and it like ironically, it or counterintuitively, I should say, it makes the meme more popular, more viral, because the people who share it can be like, yeah, I'm a person who gets this.
Um,
And so it kind of garners more attention than something that you're scrolling by and you're like, oh, this fucking meme again. Okay. And then you just keep scrolling. Whereas you're like, if you're scrolling, you're like, haha, that's a thing I just learned about, or that's a thing I know about, but I bet nobody else does, then you're more likely to be engaged in it. I think that's my running hypothesis on why memes like this get shared so much. Because like I had no clue what it was when I first saw it. I had to research it and Google image
yeah.
search to figure out what it was.
Well, it'd be fucking weird if you knew. Let's be
Yeah.
honest.
Yes, it would. Yeah, and I think it's fucking weird that whoever made the meme knew as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty wild. So again, so these are just people going back to the context of the third bomb that we never used.
Mhm.
Were these what happened to that one?
So
That was
it
just like stored away, or were they using it for these sorts of like experiments?
so it was used for experiments for quite a while. After Lewis died, the parts of the bomb or the material of the bomb got redistributed and used for other things. I'm not sure how you break down one of those, but apparently the material got put to use in some other way. But at the time, they were just holding on to it to do, for experimentation and to teach new physicists about plutonium cores and things like that, because they went through the trouble of making the thing. And so I assume, they're like, well, if we have it, we're going to use it as a scientific asset.
Yeah.
And I don't know what exactly that specific core went into making afterward, but apparently it was broken down and the pieces used for other purposes.
All right. Well, that's a very interesting story, my friend. Now I have learned something. I have
Yeah.
learned something here.
Well, I really appreciate you being on the show. I had a really good time. And
Well, thank you. Me
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. Maybe in the future you'll be on again. That'd be awesome. But yeah, I should have the episode out by Sunday. And I'll let you know.
Are we done? Okay. Are we
That's the
still
end.
recording? I can't
Yeah,
even
we're
tell. Okay.
we're still recording. Just the end of the story. I've got no
Okay.
more script left. So, I mean, you can.
Well, thank you very much for having me. This was very interesting. That's some fascinating stuff here and some deep dive that you went on to learn about this. And I appreciate that kind of absurd waste of your time. That's not really a waste of time because you're really learning something, and that's a
Yeah,
science. That's what science is all about. Sometimes you have to go on these deep dives. So I appreciate that. It is a commitment to knowledge that I respect. And I learned at least two or three facts that I will drop at some point in the future in a conversation to make it look like I know a lot more about the nuclear bombs and the science behind them than I actually do.
that's great. That's a good way to implement what we did today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.